Okay, so let's look at number 19. So the first thing that you need to do on any of these word problems is you need to actually read the problem and understand it. So what I want you to do right now is just stop this video and just kind of go through right now and read the problem. Just, you're not trying to solve, you're not trying to do anything other than just trying to read, just gonna one time read it through, make sure you're clear on what's going on. Okay. So now that you've read through it, the next time we're gonna read it again. And this time we're going to go through and we're going to kind of pick out some of the information that we know and maybe highlight it or underline it. So looking at that first sentence, Julio is paid 1.4 times his normal hourly rate for each hour he works over 30 hours in a week. So there's a lot of information there. Right now, let's kind of go through and figure out what that important information is. So we are told that he has a normal hourly rate. And he also gets paid a different rate, which is for his overtime rate, which is 1.4 times that. Now, for the normal hourly rate, he gets paid. That happens in the first 30 hours. So he gets paid his normal hourly rate for the first 30 hours. After that 30 hours, that's where he gets paid his overtime rate of that 1.4 times. So, looking at the second sentence, last week he worked 35 hours and earned $436.60. Let's pick apart that information. And so in that one, the big pieces of information are, 1, he worked 35 hours, and 2, he made a total of $436.60. So in last sentence, write and solve an equation to find Julio's normal hourly rates are. So there's actually 3 things given there. 1, we are told that we are supposed to write and solve. So there's 2 pieces. We have to write an equation, then we have to solve an equation to find his normally hourly rate. And they actually told us that that normal hourly rate is R. So next we're going to go through and define our variables. So what I want you to do right now, actually let me do that in a different color. So let's take his normal hourly rate. That is one unknown, right? We don't know how much he makes there. We don't know how much his normal hourly rate is. And the other thing we need to know is his overtime hourly rate. So right now, use the given information that we've highlighted to kind of help you assign either a number or a variable to that. So stop the video and do that. Okay, so what you should have said, for his normal hourly rate, we don't know what it is, but the problem told us that we're going to use the variable R to represent that. Now his overtime rate is something else. Now normally what we do when we have something else is we assign a different variable because it's something different than R, but in this case, they specifically told us it's 1.4 times more. So in this case, we can say it's 1.4 times R. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of put this all together as an equation. And let's think about how this equation works. So the way this equation works, let's do it in red here, is he works for a certain amount of time at his normal rate. So normal rate. And he works for a certain amount of time. And if you think about it, well, we'll come back to that in just a second. So I'm going to put a line here for the amount of time that he works. And we'll fill that in just a second. Then he works a certain amount of time at his overtime rate. Oops. And again, he works for a certain amount of time. We'll take that. Now, if you take the amount of money that he works at his normal rate and you add it to the amount of money he works at his overtime rate, so if we add these two, you get his total amount of money. So what I want you to, well, actually, I'm sorry. Let's figure out the blanks. So his normal rate, how long does he work for his normal rate? Why don't you stop the video right now and put in a number for how long he works for his normal rate, and then how long he works for his overtime rate, and use the fact that we know that. Okay, so again, his normal rate, the first 30 hours of that 35 hours is done at his normal rate, so we can put in a 30 there. His overtime rate he works for, right? If it's a total of 35 hours, and the other 5 hours is done at his overtime rate. Now, if you think about the amount of money he makes, the way you calculate how much somebody makes is you take the number of hours that they work and you multiply it by their pay rate. So in other words, we're going to take normal rate and we're going to multiply that to 30. And we're going to take overtime rate, multiply that to 5. So using our given information there and the model that we wrote, I want you to right now stop the video and write an equation. Okay, so what you should have is we have his normal rate times 30. Now normally, I'm gonna kind of do this a little bit differently. So we'd say normal rate times 30, overtime rate, which was 1.4R times 5, equals total amount of money, which we were given to be $436.60. Now, one last thing before I leave this, because this is our step of our equation and it's actually really good, but I do see a lot of students do this and it's a little bit awkward. Normally what we do is we don't normally have it formatted the way I do, so we don't usually say the variable times the number. It's usually written as a number times the variable. It doesn't, by the commutative property, doesn't really matter, but it looks better to write it like this. It looks more mathy, and it's actually easier to read. Okay, so this is our equation, and we can use that to solve. And I'm going to leave the solving up to you. Okay, so let's look at problem number 25. So again, we're going to go through the process. So the first thing you should do is you should go through and read the question. Don't worry about trying to solve it at this point. This is just a matter of us trying to understand it. So again, right now stop the video and read through it. Make sure you understand. Read through it once. Okay, hopefully you've had a good chance to read through it. So we're going to go through it again, line by line. And this is the time where we're trying to identify important pieces of information. So one angle of a triangle. So things that we're looking at, we're looking at a triangle, and specifically this is about angles of a triangle. And that angle measures 120 degrees. So this angle right here measures 120 degrees. The other two angles, the other two angles are congruent. Now, it's important, you have to make sure you understand what those words mean. So hopefully we're comfortable with what an angle of a triangle is. But that word congruent, that may or may not be familiar to you. So congruent basically means that their measures are equal. So when two things are congruent, their measures are equal. So for example, if I were to tell you that this line right here was, let's say, 2 centimeters long, and I made a line whose measure that was congruent, that would mean that the measure of line 2 is also 2 centimeters long. Okay, so again, congruent just means that their measures are equal. So now, with geometric problems, it's usually pretty useful to actually draw a picture. So I'm going to quickly draw a picture. Let's see. And whoops, well, let's see if I can do a little better job. Not very well, but let's see. So we know that one angle measure is 120 degrees. So I'm going to say this big angle right here is 120 degrees. The other two angles are congruent. So that means this angle right here and this angle right here, their measures are equal. I don't know what they are. So what do we do when we don't know what something is? Well, we call it X. So I'm going to call this measure X. And again, if that one's X, then this one's x. So the next thing we want to do is we want to write an equation. So things we need to know. One thing we need to know is what is the degree measure of the angles, the internal angles of a triangle. So in other words, if I were to take this angle, and this angle and add them all together, what is their sum? And that is 180 degrees. So let's actually go through and do what I just said. We're going to take the angle measures, add them up together, and set them equal to 180. So in other words, x plus 120 equals 180. And we can clean that up again. We can clean that up a little bit, right? X plus x is, how many x's do we have? We have 2 x's. So 2x plus 120 equals 180. So this is ready to be solved. And again, I will leave that up to you.